The Endless shows just how terrible the effects of a cosmic entity can be. At the place where this creature settled, it was able to alter reality and create several time loops of different lengths. Some of these reset every 10 years and don't seem too bad, but there is one that lasts only a few seconds, and if you happen to find yourself inside, you're going to relive those 5 seconds for all eternity. Cosmic horror isn't about what we see, it's about what we were never meant to. The human mind is simply not equipped to comprehend these entities. Not their appearance, their actions, or their motives. They don't fit into our understanding of reality, and that's the problem. When faced with something so completely outside our grasp, something that defies logic itself, the only possible outcome is madness. Of course, this is what makes cosmic horror so difficult to capture. Show too much, and the fear becomes tangible, explainable. Show too little, and it risks feeling hollow. But when it's done right, it creates something far more unsettling. The sense that we've glimpsed something forbidden, something that was never meant to be understood by us. So let's take a look at some more stories that do it right. As always, you can expect spoilers, and as mentioned earlier, let's start with The Endless. The Endless is about two brothers who go back and visit a UFO cult they escaped when they were younger. But it turns out this was never a UFO cult. It was a cult worshipping an unseen cosmic entity that seems to watch, experiment with, and even play with those who enter its territory. The only way we get to see what it looks like is through the drawings of one of the camp members. And it looks quite menacing, like an extension of the darkness of the night. One theory as to why it's invisible to everyone else is that it's made of impossible colors, so our inferior human brains can't comprehend it. Which is a cool explanation, a great way to convey that humans simply aren't set up to process these beings. It communicates by sending videotapes and photographs, casting visions on TVs and things of that nature. Basically, it's able to communicate by any visual medium known to us. So the most unsettling thing about this creature is that it establishes rules that defy natural law, binding people into inescapable, looping existences. These loops can range from a few moments to full lifetimes, but all lead to the same fate: eventual catastrophic destruction and a reset where the loop starts again from the beginning, but you don't lose your memory. And if you find yourself inside the loop during the reset point, you can't escape. Which is why the 5-second loop I mentioned earlier is the most terrifying, since entering it would definitely take at least 5 seconds, and then you'd be stuck in that tent forever. Some take this situation as a divine gift and welcome it, like the members of the cult, and they are rewarded for it. Their loop takes 10 years, and besides the eventual cataclysm, they live normal lives. Those who try to fight the loop by voluntary death are punished. The cult members seem off, but still somewhat normal. However, the effects of the shorter loops are clear. Those trapped in these are driven to madness.
Doesn't let me dream. It does that so my mind never leaves this place.
I think this movie shows just enough without ruining the mystery. At no point do they fully show the monster, which I appreciate. And the explanation that it's made up of impossible colors is much cooler and fits cosmic horror better. And there are a lot of cool concepts here, like the 3 moons and how the entity sends messages as visual mediums. And I do wonder what else the monster is capable of doing. And even more so, I wonder, why is it doing any of this? In one scene, the camp members play tug of war with it, and I thought that was pretty cool and a little funny, how this incomprehensible great entity is willing to play with humans. And seemingly it gets mad at them too. Hence, those who obey it get longer loops, and those who don't let it annihilate them get shorter ones. You don't often see the monsters in these cosmic horror tales as doing stuff that humans would, like playing or getting mad. So that makes this one stand out. But I guess questions about its motives must always remain unanswered, because we could probably not comprehend the answer. The Void is a very interesting movie. It doesn't ease you in. From the moment the film begins, reality feels unstable, like something terrible has already happened, just out of frame. One of the first shots is a bloodied man stumbling onto a desolate road, after who knows what happened to him. There is a dark hospital looming in the distance, and before anyone can make sense of the situation, the exits are cut off. The outside world fades away. and the horror begins. This isn't a movie where the tension slowly builds from the beginning, no. These events were set in motion long before the first shot. No one fully understands what's happening, least of all the people trapped inside the hospital. It's a story of cosmic horror, where confusion is part of the experience, like in many cases. Because whatever force is at play here, it doesn't really care whether you understand it or not. There are brief flashes of some mysterious shifting flesh, and an ominous shadow in the clouds. These brief scenes hint at something far bigger than what we can see and comprehend, some place we were never meant to witness. And then there's the body horror. Disturbing, visceral, and deeply unnatural. Limbs twist and extend into grotesque alien shapes. Human bodies contort and become something beyond recognition. It's a film where flesh is no longer flesh, more so Play-Doh, something waiting to be reshaped by whatever entity lies beyond the veil. At the center of it all is the hospital's doctor, a man who has already made contact with the void and, in doing so, has doomed everyone around him. Not just worshipping it, but serving as its willing conduit. His faith isn't blind. It's not like he doesn't know what he's doing. He does. He knows what's coming, and he welcomes it, no matter the cost. By the time the film reaches the climax, the true horror isn't just the creatures or the cult surrounding the hospital. It's the realization that this place, this town, these people were never anything more than a temporary barrier. The void was always waiting just behind them, and once the door is open, there is no closing it. This movie is the most vibrant and bright out of all of these, so it's all the more shocking when it doesn't hold back from the terrors it shows. So a meteor came down crashing into a family's yard, and everything that is associated with cosmic horror is spawned from it. Unexplainable sounds, strange smells, unnatural plant growth, and bizarre mutated creatures. This flora and fauna thing kinda reminds me of the shimmer from Annihilation. The color that starts appearing is something beyond human comprehension, warping reality and breaking down the boundaries of what life is supposed to be. Even though to us, it just looks like pink. The entire family slowly starts to interpret the world differently, but they aren't exactly sure what's different. It's a combination of all those incomprehensible senses, new smells, new colors. It changed how their minds work. One of the coolest aspects here is the body horror. I think it does it even better than the void. The family owns alpacas because, as the dad says, the Maya calendar declared them the animal of the future. But after exposure to the meteor's influence, they merge into a grotesque, pulsing mass of flesh. A llama hydra monster that's absolutely disgusting and cool. There's also a cat that undergoes a transformation, growing larger and turning feral. And then there's the most unsettling fusion of all. The mother and her son physically melded together by the alien presence. This movie is one of the most visually unique takes on cosmic horror, and it fully commits to showing the kind of horrors that most movies would shy away from. And, in my opinion, it doesn't mess it up. It's a sensory overload, much like the one the characters experience. A film that starts as something dreamlike and serene into something straight out of a nightmare. So this movie is of course based on a short story by H.P. Lovecraft, and I even heard somewhere that this is his favorite story that he wrote. And one of the most unnerving differences is how in the story, the gardeners are less aware of what's happening to them. Their descent to madness feels inevitable, almost like they're being absorbed into something. The way the color works in the story is more abstract. It drains the land of life, causes strange behaviors, and eventually leaves behind only gray, lifeless dust where once there were plants and animals. There's this sense of a slow dread. Something was creeping and waiting to be seen and felt and heard. Much like what happens with the pigs. The swine began growing gray and brittle and falling to pieces before they died. And the cows got even worse fates. Certain areas, or sometimes the whole body, would be uncannily shriveled or compressed, and atrocious collapses or disintegrations were common. It's always scary to me how something living and breathing can be altered in the presence of these cosmic threats. Another key difference is how Lovecraft presents the monster. or rather, the lack of one. In the movie, we see the physical consequences of the color's influence, like the fused alpacas and the human mutations. Although this is arguably necessary to make the movie more interesting, the short story allows for the horror to be more subtle. The entity isn't a creature with a shape or intent, it's something worse. It's an unknowable, invasive force that simply is. Lovecraft never tries to define the color beyond its unnatural vibrancy and effects, and that vagueness is what makes it more interesting. Much scarier than pink, how it is in the movie. Of course, there is no way to show an impossible color on a visual medium, and that's just one of the limits the movie had to face. The ending of the short story also has a more haunting sense of inevitability. While the movie ends in destruction and chaos, the short story leaves a lingering question. If something like this could land on Earth once, what's stopping it from happening again? Clearly, we can't stop it. The narrator, a surveyor, realizes that the poisoned land around the Gardner family is still tainted and the horror is not over. That quiet existential dread, the sense that something vast and incomprehensible is still out there, is what makes The Color Out of Space one of Lovecraft's best stories. So after enjoying the jaunt from my last cosmic horror video, I decided to read some more short stories from King that can be classified under cosmic horror, and they did not disappoint. I Am the Doorway tells the story of a nameless astronaut who was orbiting Venus, and somewhere during his trip, he contracted some sort of alien virus. Essentially, he starts developing eyes on his hands. The way King describes it is quite disturbing. The story says how the hands itch when the eyes are covered with bandages, and when the astronaut tries to poke them with a pencil, he feels immense pain. It's like a symbiotic relationship. There were eyes peering up at me through splits in the flesh of my fingers, and even as I watched, the flesh was dilating, retreating, as they pushed their mindless way up to the surface. But that was not what made me scream. I had looked into my own face and seen a monster. So not only are the eyes present, but the astronaut can also see through them along with his regular eyes, like a second sight. Even when his human eyes are shut, he can see through his hands. But everything looks different, or rather, it's interpreted differently. Things are described as having impossible geometry, and he himself looks like a monster from the hand's point of view. And it's more than just eyesight. They also scream when they feel pain, and they are able to make him walk and do their bidding, despite him being in a wheelchair. They even make him blow up a boy's head by using some unknown power or force. It's described as if a grenade blew up from inside his head. It's like whatever creature that merged with him is syncing its logic and way of existence with an incompatible piece of hardware. I doubt this creature on its own looks like just a hand with eyes, but when combined with a human, this is the end result. It's like a forbidden equation with a disgusting, horrid solution. It reminds me of that Prince of Darkness scene, where the message from the future could only be synced to humans through their unconscious. But in this story, that incompatibility is depicted better, because the end result is far more disturbing. I read Salem's Lot for my last video about vampires, but I didn't finish in time to talk about it then. I finished by now, and I'll say it's my favorite King novel so far. But my point is that Salem's Lot comes with a Lovecraftian prequel story, Jerusalem's Lot. Unlike Salem's Lot, which is a modern vampire novel, Jerusalem's Lot is framed as a series of letters written in 1850 by Charles Boone, a man who has recently inherited a house near the abandoned town of Jerusalem's Lot. This is Stephen King leaning fully into classic Gothic horror. So Charles and his servant Calvin soon realize something is deeply wrong with the town. The people abandoned it long ago, and whispers of an ancient evil still linger. The deeper Charles digs, the more he discovers that his ancestors, specifically his great-grandfather, James Boone, were part of something unspeakable. A cult obsessed with the forbidden book De Vermis Mystanis once performed unholy rituals here, attempting to summon a dark force that never quite left. As the story unfolds, Charles is drawn toward the ruined church where the cult once worshipped. Inside, he finds evidence of horrific rites dedicated to an entity called the Worm. The story never outright states what the Worm is, but its presence feels immense cosmic, and unstoppable, much like a Lovecraftian god. King later stated that Jerusalem's Lot was his attempt at writing a full-on Lovecraftian horror story, and in my opinion, it succeeds. While Salem's Lot focuses on the vampires terrorizing the town, this prequel suggests that the evil tied to the Marston house runs much deeper. And you get this vibe from Salem's Lot too. Whenever people enter the house, they feel a creeping sense of dread over them. And it's always reinforced that the evil here is something tangible. If Salem's Lot is about the slow decay of small-town America under supernatural influence, Jerusalem's Lot is the dark history buried beneath it. The town was always cursed. It was just waiting for the right moment to rise again. I have briefly mentioned Uzumaki in my first cosmic horror video, but I never actually went into it. I first read the story years ago, and I'm not sure if I ever quite got that feeling of dread and hopelessness in any other piece of media. On the surface, this is a story about a small town in Japan that becomes obsessed with spirals, but of course, there's a sinister explanation. The spiral is a force beyond comprehension. It's not just a pattern or a symbol, but an entity, a presence that corrupts and consumes everything. It starts off slow, with spirals forming in the clouds and the water. Strange, but nothing too alarming. In the very first chapter, we get to see one man's obsession with spirals. It starts off tame, by collecting anything spiral-shaped and twisting his soup so it makes a spiral, something like a strange addiction. But this interest keeps escalating, and the man starts spinning his eyes in a circle, and then his tongue, and then ultimately he twists his entire body and puts himself in a barrel, spiral-shaped of course. Then we are introduced to more events. A girl's hair twists at the ends, another girl's face falls into itself, and some boys are even turned into snails. Slowly we are pulled into the town spiral ourselves, by witnessing more and more of these bizarre events. The horror escalates until even the laws of physics start to unravel. Unlike other cosmic horror stories, where an external entity invades our reality, Uzumaki presents the spiral as something intrinsic to the town itself, an inevitable force of nature. The people don't just fear the spiral, they worship it, succumb to it, and are ultimately reshaped by it. The way the story progresses feels like everyone is being pulled into this inescapable vortex. No matter how much you resist, you are inevitably drawn in. And maybe it's not really a spiral. Maybe it's something else entirely, and the spiral is the closest thing we can perceive it as. The characters finally witness this underlying source of madness, the catalyst to the horrible spiral virus. And it turns out to be essentially another dimension existing underneath the town, riddled with spirals of all sorts. The ground is filled with twisted, contorted bodies, and there are spires and towers, all intricately woven into spiral shapes, emitting a strange, hypnotizing light. And then again, maybe the source of madness isn't this town, or at least, it doesn't look like this in its true form. It's just the closest thing that we can understand it as. There's something deeply unsettling about Uzumaki that lingers long after reading it. It's that core Lovecraftian idea that we are at the mercy of forces that we don't understand. But what makes this story unique is that there is no great old one, no alien intelligence orchestrating these events. Just a shape, a fundamental part of the universe, asserting its dominance over everything. Thank you very much for watching, and a big thank you for 20,000 subscribers. That's a huge milestone. I was going to include Bloodborne in this video, but I underestimated how much time it would take me to actually beat it. But I'm really enjoying it, and maybe sometime in the future I'll make a video on like cosmic horror and games, and include some other ones with it too. But yeah, the next video should be scary depictions of sci-fi, so look out for that. And once again, a big thank you for the support.